How Nicolás Maduro was arrested. January 3, 2026, 11:47 a.m. The black armored convoy came to a stop at the Simón Bolívar International Bridge. Inside the lead vehicle, Nicolás Maduro sat perfectly still, his hands resting on his knees, staring straight ahead. Outside, International Criminal Court officials stood waiting alongside Colombian military personnel. In less than 5 minutes, the President of Venezuela would be in handcuffs, and one of the most dramatic arrests in modern political history would be complete. But this arrest didn't happen suddenly. It was the culmination of 72 hours of chaos, betrayal, and the spectacular collapse of a regime that had seemed unshakable just days before. This is exactly how it happened. Let's rewind to where this truly began. January 2026. Venezuela held an election that the international community had been demanding for years. Maduro had ruled since 2013, presiding over economic catastrophe, hyperinflation exceeding 1 million%, 7 million people fleeing the country, food shortages, hospital collapses. But he maintained power through one crucial element: military loyalty. The election results came in. Independent observers, leaked internal documents, and opposition vote counts all pointed to the same conclusion: Maduro had lost decisively. The Venezuelan people had voted overwhelmingly for change. But Maduro's electoral council declared him the winner anyway. The announcement sparked the largest protests in Venezuelan history. This is where things started to fracture, because this time something was different. Junior military officers, watching their own families starve while Maduro lived in luxury, began questioning whether they should keep following orders. The cracks in military loyalty, which had held Maduro in power for 13 years, started to show. Then came February and 3 events that would seal Maduro's fate. First, Venezuela's Supreme Court, packed with Maduro loyalists, issued a shocking ruling. They declared the election results fraudulent. Maduro's own judicial system, the very institution he'd corrupted to maintain power, turned against him. Legal scholars would later call this unprecedented. The court gave internal legitimacy to what everyone already knew: Maduro had stolen the election. Second, Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino Lopez made a televised statement that sent shockwaves through Venezuela. He announced that the armed forces would respect the will of the people and would not use violence against protesters. He didn't explicitly call for Maduro to step down, but every Venezuelan understood the message: the military would no longer automatically defend the regime. Without military backing, Maduro was vulnerable. But the third event was what truly ended Maduro's presidency. U.S. intelligence agencies released intercepted communications showing that Maduro was planning to flee to Russia with billions of dollars stolen from state coffers. The recordings were damning: Maduro discussing escape logistics with Russian officials, arranging money transfers, planning to abandon Venezuela entirely while taking everything he could carry. When those recordings went public, something fundamental broke. Even Maduro's most loyal supporters felt betrayed. They defended him as a champion of the poor, as Hugo Chávez's heir, as someone fighting imperialism. But the recordings revealed the truth. He wasn't planning to fight for Venezuela. He was planning to rob it and run. The protests exploded with renewed fury. More critically, military officers who'd been willing to maintain order while Maduro ruled were absolutely unwilling to shoot protesters so he could escape with stolen money. The loyalty that had been Maduro's shield for 13 years evaporated in days. January 3, 2026, 2:17 a.m. This is when Maduro made his move. A motorcade of 6 armored vehicles left Miraflores Presidential Palace in Caracas. The destination, La Carlota Military Air Base, where a plane waited to take him to Havana, then onwards to Moscow. It was supposed to be quick and quiet. By dawn, Maduro would be gone. But the plan had leaked. Military officers who decided to side with the opposition had informed both Venezuelan and international authorities. What Maduro didn't know as his convoy raced through empty Caracas streets was that everyone was waiting for him. The United States had already acted. They'd closed Venezuelan airspace, threatening to intercept any aircraft attempting to leave with Maduro aboard. The message was clear: he wasn't flying out. Colombia, which had dealt with millions of Venezuelan refugees, had troops positioned at border crossings. Brazil had alerted border security. Every escape route was being sealed. At 3:04 a.m., Maduro's convoy approached La Carlota Military Air Base. Then the headlights appeared. Military vehicles blocked the road ahead. Behind them, more vehicles cut off retreat. Maduro's convoy was boxed in by Venezuelan military units loyal to Defense Minister Padrino Lopez. Inside the lead vehicle, Maduro's security chief made a calculation. They were outnumbered. Air escape was impossible. Fighting would mean bloodshed and guaranteed capture anyway. He picked up the radio and began negotiating. The negotiation took 4 hours. Maduro's security detail wanted guarantees of safe passage for themselves and their families. They wanted assurance they wouldn't face prosecution for following orders. International mediators, Colombia, Brazil, Mexico, worked through the night to broker terms. The deal was this: Maduro's security personnel would receive immunity and safe passage. Their families would be protected. In exchange, they would surrender Maduro to international custody. At 7:19 a.m. on March 3rd, the agreement was reached. But surrender him to whom? This created an immediate crisis. Venezuela's opposition wanted to try him domestically for corruption and human rights abuses. The International Criminal Court, which had been investigating Maduro since 2021, had an outstanding warrant for crimes against humanity. Multiple countries had competing legal claims. If handled wrong, this could spark a conflict that would destabilize the entire region. Brazil, Mexico, and Colombia worked frantically to create a solution everyone could accept. They proposed this: Maduro would be transported to the Colombian border and handed to ICC custody. He would face international charges first at The Hague. Later, if Venezuela's new government requested it, he could potentially be extradited for domestic charges. This solution satisfied the international community while preventing chaos inside Venezuela. March 4 was spent in preparation. Maduro was held at a secure military facility while logistics were arranged. ICC prosecutors flew to Colombia. International media gathered at the border. Venezuelan celebration began before the official arrest. Millions filled streets across the country, waving flags, crying, embracing. For them, Maduro's rule was already over. March 5, 2026, the convoy carrying Maduro left the military facility at dawn. 6 vehicles, heavy security, traveling the route from Caracas towards the Colombian border. Inside, Maduro sat in silence. He'd worn a dark suit, wanting to maintain dignity, perhaps, or simply out of habit after years of presidential appearances. The journey took 4 hours. At every checkpoint, crowds gathered, shouting, celebrating, some throwing objects at the convoy. Maduro never looked out the windows. He sat motionless, staring straight ahead, as the country he had ruled for 13 years erupted in joy at his departure. 11:47 a.m. The convoy reached the Simón Bolívar International Bridge, the border crossing between Venezuela and Colombia. The vehicle stopped. Doors opened. ICC officials in formal attire approached. Colombian military personnel stood at attention. International media cameras captured every moment. Maduro stepped out of the vehicle. He looked exhausted, his face drawn, his movements slow. Gone was the defiant leader who'd given fiery speeches denouncing imperialism. This was simply a tired man who knew his time was finished. The lead ICC prosecutor approached with the arrest warrant. His voice was formal, official, carrying the weight of international law. Maduro Moros, by authority of the International Criminal Court, you are under arrest for crimes against humanity. These charges include persecution, arbitrary detention, torture, and other inhumane